Chapter 9. The Secret of the Dead. On the 8th day after Pelletier found the Eskimo igloo, Billy MacVeigh came up through a gray dawn with his footsore dogs, his letters, and his medicines. He had traveled all of the preceding night, and his feet dragged heavily. It was with a feeling of fear that he at last saw the black cliffs of Fullerton rising above the ice. He dreaded the first opening of the cabin door. What would he find? During the past 48 hours he had figured on Pelletier's chances, and they were 2 to 1 that he would find his partner dead in his bunk. And if not, if Pelletier still lived, what a tale there would be to tell the sick man. For he knew that he must tell someone, and Pelletier would keep his secret. And he would understand. Day after day, as he had hurried straight into the north, Billy's loneliness and heartbreak weighed more and more heavily upon him. He tried to force Isobel out of his thoughts, but it was impossible. 1,000 visions of her rose before him, and each mile that he drew himself farther away from her seemed only to add to the nearness of her spirit at his side, and to the strange pain in his heart that rose now and then to his lips in sobbing breaths that he fought with himself to stifle. And yet, with his own grief and hopelessness, he experienced more and more each day a compensating joy. It was the joy of knowing that he had given back life and hope to Isobel and her husband. Each day he figured their progress along with his own. From the Eskimo village he had sent a message back to Churchill with a long report for the officer in command there, and in that report he had lied. He reported Scotty Deane as having died of the injury he had received in the snowslide. Not for a moment had he regretted the falsehood. He also promised to report at Churchill to testify against Bucky Smith as soon as he reached Pelletier and put him on his feet. On this last day, as he saw the towering cliffs of Fullerton ahead of him, he wondered how much he would tell to Pelletier if he found him alive. Mentally he rehearsed the amazing story of what came to him that night on the Barren, of the dogs coming across the snow, the great, dark, frightened eyes of the woman, and the long, narrow box on the sledge. He would tell Pelletier all that. He would tell how he had made a camp for her that night, and how, later, he had told her that he loved her, and had begged one kiss. And then the disclosures of the morning, the deserted tent, the empty box, the little note from Isobel, and the revelation that the box had contained the living body of the man for whom he and Pelletier had patrolled this desolate country for 2,000 miles. But would he tell the truth of what had happened after that? He quickened his tired pace as the dogs climbed up from the ice of the bay to the sloping ridge, and stared hard ahead of him. The dogs tugged harder as the smell of home entered their nostrils. At last the roof of the cabin came in view. MacVeigh's bloodshot eyes were like an animal's in their eagerness. "Pelly, old boy!" he gasped to himself. "Pelly!" He stared harder. And then he spoke a low word to the dogs and stopped. He wiped his face. A deep breath of relief fell from his lips. Straight up from the chimney of the cabin there rose a thick column of smoke. He came up to the door of the cabin quietly, wondering why Pelletier did not see him or hear the 3 or 4 sharp yelps the dogs had given. He twisted off his snowshoes, chuckling as he thought of the surprise he would give his mate. His hand was on the door latch when he stopped. The smile left his lips. Startled wonderment filled his face as he bent close to the door and listened, and for a moment his heart throbbed with a terrible fear. He had returned too late, perhaps a day, 2 days. Pelletier had gone mad. He could hear him raving inside, filling the cabin with a laughter that sent a chill of horror through his veins. Mad! A sob broke from his lips, and he turned his face up to the gray sky. And then the laughter turned to song. It was the sweet love song which Pelletier had told him that the girl down south used to sing to him when they were alone out under the stars. Suddenly it broke off short, and in its place he heard another sound. With a cry he opened the door and burst in. "My God!" he cried. "Pelly! Pelly!" Pelletier was on his knees in the middle of the floor. But it was not the look of wonderment and joy in his face that Billy saw first. He stared at the little golden-haired creature on the floor in front of him. He had traveled hard, almost day and night, and for an instant it flashed upon him that what he saw was not real. Before he could move or speak again, Pelletier was on his feet, wringing his hands and almost crying in his gladness. There was no sign of fever or madness in his face now. Like one in a dream, Billy heard what he said. "God bless you, Billy. I'm glad you've come," he cried. "We've been waitin' and watchin', and not more'n a minute ago we were at the window looking along the edge of the bay through the binoculars. You must have been under the ridge. My God! A little while ago I thought I was dying. I thought I was alone in the world. Alone. Alone. But look. Look, Billy. I've got a family." Little Mystery had climbed to her feet. She was looking at Billy wonderingly, her golden curls tousled about her pretty face, and gripping 2 or 3 of Pelletier's old letters in her tiny hand. And then she smiled at Billy and held out the letters to him. In an instant he had dropped Pelletier's hands and caught her up in his arms. "I've got letters for you in my pocket, Pelly," he gasped. "But first, you've got to tell me who she is and where you got her." Briefly Pelletier told of Blake's visit, the fight, and of the finding of Little Mystery. "I'd have died if it hadn't been for her, Billy," he finished. "She brought me back to life. But I don't know who she is, or where she came from. There wasn't anything in his pockets or in the igloo to tell. I buried him out there, shallow, so you could take a look when you came back." He snatched like a starving man for food at the letters MacVeigh pulled from his pocket. While he read, Billy sat down with Little Mystery on his knees. She laughed and put her worn little hands up to his rough face. Her eyes were blue, like Isobel's. And suddenly he crushed his face close down against her soft curls and held her so close to him that for a moment she was frightened. A little later Pelletier looked up. His eyes shone, his thin face was radiant with joy. "God bless the sweetest little girl in the world, Billy," he whispered, huskily. "She says she's lonely for me. She tells me to hurry down there to her. She says that if I don't come soon she'll come up to me. Read 'em, Billy." He looked in astonishment at the change which he saw in MacVeigh's face. Billy accepted the letters mechanically and placed them on the edge of the bunk near which he was sitting. "I'll read them after a while," he said slowly. Little Mystery clambered from his knee and ran to Pelletier. Billy was staring straight into the other's face. "You're sure you've told me everything, Pelly? There wasn't anything in his pockets? You searched well?" "Yes, there was nothing." "But you were sick—" "That's why I buried him shallow," interrupted Pelletier. "He's close to the last cross, just under the ice and snow. I wanted you to look for yourself." Billy rose to his feet. He took Little Mystery in his arms again and looked closely in her face. There was a strange look in his eyes. She laughed at him, but he did not seem to notice it. And then he held her out to Pelletier. "Pelly, did you ever notice eyes very closely?" he asked. "Blue eyes?" Pelletier stared at him, amazed. "My Jeanne has blue eyes? And have they little brown dots in them, like a wood violet?" "No." "They're blue, just blue, ain't they?" "Yes." "And I suppose most all blue eyes are just blue, without the little brown spots? Wouldn't you think so?" "What in heaven's name are you driving at?" demanded Pelletier. "I just wanted you to notice that her eyes have little brown spots in them," replied Billy. "I've only seen one other pair of eyes, just like hers." He turned toward the door. "I'm going out to care for the dogs and dig up Blake," he added. "I can't rest until I've seen him." Pelletier placed Little Mystery on her feet. "I'll see to the dogs," he said, "but I don't want to look at Blake again." The two men went out, and while Pelletier led the dogs to a lean-to behind the cabin, Billy began to work with an axe and spade at the spot his comrade had pointed out to him. 10 minutes later he came to Blake. An excitement which he had tried to hide from Pelletier overcame his sense of horror as he dragged out the stiff and frozen corpse of the man. It was a terrible picture that the dead man made, with his coarse bearded face turned up to the sky, and his teeth still snarling as they had snarled on the day he died. Billy knew most men who had come into the north above Churchill, but he had never looked upon Blake before. It was probable that the dead man had told a part of the truth, and that he was a sailor left on the upper coast by some whaler. He shivered as he began going through his pockets. Each moment added to his disappointment. He found a few things, a knife, 2 keys, several coins, a fire flint, and other articles, but there was no letter or writing of any kind, and that was what he had hoped to find. There was nothing that might have solved the mystery of the miracle that had descended upon them. He rolled the dead man into the grave, covered him over, and went into the cabin. Pelletier was in his usual place, on his hands and knees, with Little Mystery astride his back. He paused in a mad race across the cabin floor and looked up with inquiring eyes. The little girl held up her arms, and MacVeigh tossed her halfway to the ceiling and then hugged her golden head close up to his chilled face. Pelletier jumped to his feet. His face grew serious as Billy looked at him over the child's tousled curls. "I found nothing, absolutely nothing of any account," he said. He placed Little Mystery on one of the bunks, and faced the other with a puzzled look in his eyes. "I wish you hadn't been in a fever on that day of the fight, Pelly," he said. "He must have said something that would give us a clue." "Maybe he did, Billy," replied Pelletier, looking with a shiver at the few things MacVeigh had placed on the cabin table. "But there's no use worrying any more about it. It ain't in reason that she's got any people up here, 600 miles from the shack of a white man, that I'd own a little beauty like her. She's mine. I found her. She's mine to keep." He sat down at the table, and MacVeigh sat down opposite him, smiling sympathetically into Pelletier's eyes. "I know you want her bad, Pelly," he said, "and I know the girl would love her. But she's got people, somewhere, and it's our duty to find 'em. She didn't drop out of a balloon, Pelly. Do you suppose the dead man might be her father?" It was the first time he had asked this question, and he noted the other's sudden shudder of revulsion. "I've thought of that. But it can't be. He was a beast, and she's a little angel. Billy, her mother must have been beautiful. That's what made me guess, fear—" Pelletier wiped his face uneasily, and the two young men stared into each other's eyes. MacVeigh leaned forward, waiting. I figured it all out last night, lying awake there in my bunk," continued Pelletier. "And as the second best friend I have on earth, I want to ask you not to go any farther, Billy. She's mine. My Jeanne, down there, will love her like a real mother, and we'll bring her up right. But if you go on, Billy, you'll find something unpleasant. I swear you will." "You know—" "I've guessed," interrupted the other. "Billy, sometimes a beast, a man-beast, holds an attraction for a woman, and Blake was that sort of a beast. You remember, 2 years ago, a sailor ran away with the wife of a whaler's captain, away up at Narwhale Inlet. Well—" Again the two men stared silently at each other. MacVeigh turned slowly toward the child. She had fallen asleep, and he could see the dull shimmer of her golden curls as they lay scattered over Pelletier's pillow. "Poor little devil!" he exclaimed softly. "I believe that woman was Little Mystery's mother," Pelletier went on. "She couldn't bear to leave the little kid when she went with Blake, so she took her along. Some women do that. And after a time she died. Then Blake took up with an Eskimo woman. You know what happened after that. We don't want Little Mystery to know all this when she grows up. It's better not. She's too little to remember, ain't she? She won't ever know." "I remember the ship," said Billy, not taking his eyes off Little Mystery. "She was the Silver Seal. Her captain's name was Thompson." He did not look at Pelletier, but he could feel the quick, tense stiffening of the other's body. There was a moment's silence. Then Pelletier spoke in a low, unnatural voice. "Billy, you ain't going to hunt him up, are you? That wouldn't be fair to me or to the kid. My Jeanne'll love her, and maybe some day your kid'll come along and marry her." MacVeigh rose to his feet. Pelletier did not see the sudden look of grief that shot into his face. "What do you say, Billy?" "Think it over, Pelly," came back Billy's voice, huskily. "Think it over. I don't want to hurt you, and I know you think a lot of her, but think it over. You wouldn't rob her father, would you? And she's all he's got left of the woman. Think it over, Pelly, good and hard. I'm going to bed and sleep a week." End of chapter 9. Recording by Rod